2020 at 1:30 p.m. We'll start with the presentation agenda and the mayor's report.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to. Do we have a motion to suspend the rules to amend the agenda?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor? Lucy, can you read the changes?
To our policy agenda, we're substituting item 4B, ordinance pertaining to cemeteries. We're removing item 4C for 2 weeks, the resolution concerning the plat for the cemetery. To our consent agenda, we're adding a substitute for 5H, the resident only, for tax folder amendment number 9 to the master services agreement with CDM Smith. And we're also adding 5.0, resolution continuing a state of emergency for Hurricane Zeta.
All right. Do I have a motion to
move it as
amend as amended?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor? 7-0. All right. Now we'll do the mayor's report.
Okay. Let me start over again. I'm going to welcome everyone to our final meeting of November and wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. A lot has been happening to move forward with regarding the debris cleanup and refiring our business and opportunities that are before us the rest of 2020. I think the Crowder Gulf has been doing a pretty good job in visiting all areas of the city. Of the 200,000 cubic yards estimated, there's 60,000 plus at this point in time. A couple of consolidation or yards that areas, one over by the Boulevard site and one in off of Pops Ferry, I believe, are happening. And so they're going taking most of the vegetation and grinding it down to about 4-to-1 before it goes to landfill. I think they're making passes throughout the city on separate trucks to get the construction debris, hard, things that are not vegetation, and placing that in the landfill too. So those things are moving along. Of the buildings we've got reviews from both our insurance folks as well as FEMA and MEMA in process. So we're trying to get the final figures as we plug forward, and there's some cash flow consideration on what we'll pay for and how long it will take for reimbursement. But we're, this is not the first occasion of this sort of thing, but it's, again, we dodged 4 bullets, but we just had our number on us this time, and we'll get through this one. So that's about where we are with regard to the operations and trying to recover from Zeta. And we're thinking of those folks that had a Category 5, I think last night in Nicaragua. I guess that's where it was, or wound up. But anyway, hopefully that season is done for us, but knock on wood. That's about it as far as my report, but I'd like to ask Jonathan Juba to come up and give us a report on the marathon. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, everybody. If y'all don't remember me, it's my 5th time to come and speak to you guys and ladies, and I appreciate it. This is our 5th year of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Marathon, and as everybody in the room understands, it's been an interesting year. Also, because of Zeta, I'm in town to try to work out a new finish line. The ballpark has suffered a lot of damage, and so we're trying to figure out exactly what to do so we can finish the race right outside of MGM Park. So we have some course adjustments and things to do, but we're gonna do that. What's really exciting is that right now we have about 2,700 runners registered to come run the event, which is December 12th and 13th. That puts us on track. We probably won't make the numbers that we made last year, but we expect to be around 3,200 or 3,300 participants registered for the event, which is actually far greater than what we thought it was going to be. The interesting fact from a money coming into Biloxi and coming down to the coast, though, is with the lack of other races around the country, of the 2,700 people that are registered right now, 1,674 of them are from out of state. We currently have 46 states represented from the nation that are coming in. We have runners from Canada, Mexico, and Colombia that are also coming as well. From the rooms that we're tracking with the hotel and casino partners that we have an agreement with, from a room night standpoint, we have over 800 room nights booked for the weekend right now, which is far greater than we've ever had for any of the events that we've done previously. So we're excited about that. We're happy to be back. As always, Biloxi has been a great host city. We appreciate everything that y'all do for us. If there's anything I can do or be of service, if you have questions, need some more information, I'm actually in town for the next 2 days, so I'll be here, and I'll make sure that the mayor has my contact information if anybody needs to reach out. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate your efforts and your energy and keeping this thing going. And it's always has been a success and it will be one, I'm certain. So that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we'll move to the council reports. Dr. Tisdale?
Yes, Mayor, you going to run in the marathon again?
If they let me use a motorcycle, I will. Okay.
There you go. Just with this debris hauling and pickup and everything, just in looking ahead, because we'll have more of these storms, unfortunately, and I suspect the administration is already working on some of these things, but I have some recommendations. One would be a procedure established so that the debris pickup and the traffic signal replacement or repair progress can be tracked and communicated to the public online through the website or B-mails. I think Vincent is passing on what information he has. Just because those are the two questions that I'm sure we're all asked most frequently. When's this traffic signal going to be replaced, and when are they coming to pick up the stuff in front of my house? That the debris removal be coordinated, if at all possible, may not be possible between the contracted debris hauler, and I'm thinking Pelican Waste, because I know they're passing by piles and this one stops to pick up this one stops to pick up that. There are bagged leaves and yard waste, that kind of stuff that's left. So I think in looking at it and making a decision who's going to pick up what, sometimes things are not left thinking the other person will get it or the other company will get it. Sorting debris, I think, helps, and I know originally we were told just get things to the curb, but I've noticed just in picking it up, they got fence parts from me, which is great, but everything else is still there, just like with most folks, and I know they'll get to me when they get to me. I know they'll get to me, I just don't know when. The other thing I would suggest is just, I don't know if the city has a drone or a video drone, but I'm thinking just the video footage from that in neighborhoods would allow folks, I think, to see the difference as these haulers and Pelican Waste come by and pick up all that stuff. But and could be used, I guess, by other departments, maybe the police department or engineering for other things than storms. And last thing, as you noted, Mayor, next week is Thanksgiving. We don't have a council meeting next week, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Newman?
No report.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, we had a few problems last week and dealt with Mike Leonard and the mayor, and we opened up the commercial harbor. Those people had no place to park, so I think they signed the waiver. So a lot of those are ice boats. They work short trips and everything, so it's all allowed to come back in. It made about 25 or 30 little businesses happy, so that worked out great. The other thing, we had a problem with the CPU museum with no air conditioning. Somehow or another, Mike figured out the right guy to come in and do it, and they got a lot of the air conditioning working. I don't know about all of them. Maybe you give us an update on that, Mike, on what happened after they stood up some of the units in it.
I was on the call with the contractor later, a little earlier this morning. They're finished their mitigation effort, which is getting 8 of the 15 units stood up and working. The other ones have various issues that they can't get working, but those 8 is enough, given the weather we have right now, to keep the museum relatively at, stable temperature and such that the exhibits won't be messed up. They're going to return, we just issued a second PO. The first PO, by the way, including the crane, was only about $7,000 for a day's work with a little army of little ants crawling all over the roof there. They've recommended we do some additional mitigation involving the electronics that will allow most of the other units to get going, and they're going to come back. They've been already issued another PO to come back on the 30th. The total of all of that work is about $18,000. We won't have to do anything more than that for now. A lot will depend on the insurance and whether the insurance adjusters allow us to replace those units or whether we can just do repairs and so forth. So, but they're up and running now. And I mean, the story of the day at this point in a storm recovery is mitigation. Mitigation is those actions taken either for life safety reasons or to make sure that the damage doesn't get any worse. So that's really what we're up to. For example, in your harbor that you just talked about, we got virtually all of the boats back, but not all the piers are open because we can't get to some of them because they're just too dangerous. So we've got them barricaded off, and we've got a contractor give us an estimate. We probably won't execute that for now and wait for a while, because I think if we can operate with the slips that we have, that's enough to get us for now. So that's 2 success stories anyway in terms of mitigation.
It made the people, it made them happy, that the city, stepped up and helped them, just like helping any small business, so they really appreciated that. The other thing, you two saved $100,000, those Joe Moran pictures, they can't take the heat. And there's 2 of them right there worth $100,000 each, was donated to the museum, so without the air conditioning, them things can't make it. They have to be taken out of there. So that worked out fine. It was only a couple of days, so that worked out good. So you saved 2 of the original Joe Moran's painting, and that's pretty awesome. That's some huge ones hanging on the walls. And last thing, like the day they come by my street, they picked up all the trees out of the pile. So they got somebody else picking up the leaves and that. They picked up the big limbs and stuff like that, but they left like the leaves. So they have somebody else following them.
Good.
Well, I've watched them operate. If they can get the leaves, they do pick them up. Remember, they're working with a big old scoop, and they've got crews on the ground following them that sweep up the leaves, and then and they try and grab as many as they can. But this ain't going to be like a yard of the month
No.
when they get done. I mean, they're going to pick up everything they can. To add to the debris removal comment, just for Ward 7, I just got off the phone with, they've agreed to a site in Woolmarket for another transfer site. They're on Shortcut Road, and our contractor's working up the permit for MDEQ right now. In the meantime, we've asked, and they have deployed a second truck into Ward 7 so that they can, given that you're 55% of the size of the city, that we thought maybe you're a little shorthanded on debris trucks, so we've deployed 1 or 2, at least 2 trucks to that ward right now. And so that's, because I've gotten a lot of calls from Woolmarket. People have been very polite. We understand you're going to get to us, just kind of curious when. So that second transfer site will help speed the turnaround from the dump.
That's on Shortcut? Okay.
They had no problem. I think they'll get it done. It just takes time, and that's a lot of debris they're picking up. So
In Ward
that's
6,
it.
Ward 6, Mike,
The last I knew, we had 2 trucks in Ward 6. And I've gotten a couple of calls from Ward 6 too.
Yep.
Yeah.
okay.
North of the bay, the process is a little different because we don't have a transfer site yet, but they should be before they, and if I haven't said this before, we've agreed to let the contractor shut down for Thanksgiving. They're all from Pennsylvania, and they're going to get to go home for Thanksgiving and then come back and start up again. By the time they start up again, we'll have that transfer site working north of the bay. That should speed things up. The numbers the mayor mentioned earlier are right on the money, 60,000 cubic yards already hauled.
That's a good thing. They deserve to be home for Thanksgiving. Just like everybody else. That's a good thing. That's it, Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Deming?
I may have missed it, Mike. Last time we talked about how many crews there were and how many trucks. Have we increased that, or are we just at this status?
I know some
Yeah.
trucks ended up here after they started. I think they originally started with like 8 or 9, and as I recall, there's 12 or 13 trucks now. And those are those big double trucks.
Right. Thank you, Christy Labata. I got your email. While I was looking at it, I just wanted to clarify the traffic delineators were for the right-hand lane as you come down Pops Ferry Road in front of Margaret Sherry Library. Those,
Yeah, that's where they are,
okay.
where they're going.
Is it your department or is it Public Works that would deal with signage?
That's Public Works.
Okay, I will.
I did put in I don't know if Billy Ray's here. I was gonna put in a work order for them to put up some signage about those delineators, right turn only and that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's what you're going on.
Okay. Lastly, real quick, I know I got in the email that we're gonna push back the sidewalk project until, you said it looks like the concrete team is backed up until the end of December now?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, well,
I know.
No,
And
look-
unfortunately, it's backed up on all of its projects. We have some other ones other ones that the mayor wants done that are being pushed back too. So we're trying to get everything done at once, and he's been impacted by all these storms as well, so.
well, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Glavin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Jonathan for that report for the marathon. It's a great event. We're seeing those room numbers that you talked about into the hotels and certainly some of the complimentary in kind that you requested to ensure that it's a great event. We got many events traditionally that, as I mentioned in our last meeting, it's good to see this one and get some visitors here, and hopefully we can continue that and fight the hurricane and the other things that we're fighting to make sure that they're as successful as they can be. I just want to follow up on a couple other things too. Director Levitard, are you still here? I see you in the back. Just want to follow up. In one of the previous meetings, you reported that there was some damage in Waters View and that we were going to try to reopen to see if the county could revisit helping us clear the ditches that are flowing.
The county has agreed to help. They requested that Public Works, if the Public Works supply the labor, that they would haul all the material off. So really, it's Public Works' decision if they want to supply the labor to get that done.
Okay.
We've got the permit in place. It's kind of between Public Works and the county.
Gotcha.
this
Well,
point.
listen, I want to express my appreciation for getting that permit. That was not an easy thing to get.
Yeah, thank you.
And when we get those types of permits in place, we should kind of try to follow through with all our resources if we can
Absolutely.
to clear those ditches. I'm trying to give an update to the neighborhood over there on that side on what the status is, and I told them that we're continuing to discuss it, but it was going to be revisited with the county. Okay, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you for that. And I know we're chasing a lot of the debris removal, but I want to thank everyone, including the council, for, we passed a resolution giving 6 months relief on the debris repairs. I see a lot of people, at least in my ward, getting their roofs repaired and making fence repairs, and they've expressed a lot of gratitude to waiving some of those, the burden of some of those additional expenses to allow them to get some of those repairs done quickly. And with that, that'll conclude my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Guines?
Thank you, Mr. President. Real quick, again, thank you guys for the report on the debris removal. I would like to just ask that relay a message to them to be careful because there are kids out there And I think there may have been an incident with one of them brushing up against some of the youth that are out there. So just remind them to be careful. Also wanted to ask about who's in charge of the cemetery? Cemetery,
Cemetery
okay.
falls under Public Works if you're talking about maintenance of the cemetery.
Maintenance, yes.
There's a 9-man crew that works there
Okay.
every day.
Yeah, I've received quite a few calls about cleaning it up after the storm, so.
We're working on the live people, and we'll get to the dead ones later.
Yeah, we'll get the dead trees out.
And just, Councilman, as you know. We've got a lot of big trees down there, and they're on the list. Community Development has got POs cut on all the trees that we need to get down, and the tree contractors are just so damn busy right now. They'll get to them, but their POs have been issued.
Okay, and my thing was to just bring attention to it, so that we can get it cleaned up, because, you know, after a storm, a natural disaster, the natural instinct is for people to go see their loved ones for whatever reason, so just wanted to mention. That concludes my report, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Gines. I just have a couple of things. Christie, on Wool Market Road, I'm getting a lot of calls, and I know that we have the detour set up going through Larkin subdivision. Do you know how long that we're, a time frame, approximate, just so I can let them know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll find out for you.
Okay, if you can, just one of the schools are one reason, because they're having to alter their bus routes.
Yeah.
And they said that's lengthening their bus routes like 20 minutes or so, and so they're just wanting to know, so they can let parents know as well
I'll
on
find
that.
out for you.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I have is a reminder, December 12th, we'll be having the Wool Market Christmas Parade, 1 o'clock lineup, 2 o'clock, the parade will start, and of course, we're eliminating the social event at the end and implementing some social distancing guidelines for that, so we'd like everyone to participate in that. It's the end of our council report. At this time, we'll move to the public agenda. Citizens comment section. Total allotted time will be 45 minutes, 3 minutes per person. Whenever you come to the front, if you will, please state your name and sign in on the sheet at the table. Do I have anyone on my left side of the room that wants to make comments?
Yes, sir. David Wheeler, 185 Main Street, Biloxi. Here on item 4D on your agenda, requesting vacation of the swell easements on various lots in Elsie Place subdivision. Those easements are just paper easements. They're on the plat. Nothing's ever been done on the ground. My client is in the process of purchasing that property to expand the apartment complexes to the west. And this will just go along with that. We've already collapsed all of the, I think, 25 lots into 2 lots, basically, so that it can all be one complex. And we have some conditional use application to approve that going to the Planning Commission. That'll also be coming up to y'all probably in maybe later December, maybe the last meeting of the year, to get that approved so we can get working on it.
All right, will you, if you'll stay around for when that comes up, just in case anyone has any questions.
Sure.
For that item, thank you. Anyone else on the left side of the room? Anyone on my right side of the room? Anyone in the back? All right, if no one else, that closes our public agenda. At this time, we'll move to the policy agenda.
Ordinance to amend the LDO specifically pertaining to short-term rental and timeshare uses.
Right.
Moved by Tisdale and Lawrence.
This was previously moved by Tisdale and Lawrence.
Yes, my only comments would be that we had,
Your time's up.
3 seconds is up.
you're drawing everybody's attention to my outstanding comment, right, that's going to occur. Is that the 2-minute warning? You may recall we had some discussion on whether the conditional use would be prohibited in RM 20 and 30. We had a lot of discussion and a vote on that. So that's really no longer part of this matter, as was noted in the resolution. I have no comments that I haven't made previously. I mean, I can live with what's down here. And we only have, Mr. Creed, we only have one timeshare condo. Is that Chateau LeGrand? Okay, thank you. That's all, thank you.
Mr. Lawrence?
What did he actually do different? This guy's been before us about 10 times. What's the new rule now? What game we doing now?
If you'll recall, this was table subject to the workshop that we had 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so all that's happening now is that ordinance, as it was written, is being brought back to the city council to vote on it. Now, I guess the highlights that are in here would be that we've separated the definition of short-term rental and timeshare. In the previous ordinance, they were kind of combined together, but we've taken the definitions that come out of the American Planning Association definition and put them in there separately so that there's no question about which is which. The other change to the ordinance would be that this would not allow any existing apartment complexes to convert over to short-term rental. Now, short-term rental would still be allowed in RM20 and RM30 as a conditional use if someone comes in and their proposal is to design it to meet hotel regulations, then they could build it from the ground up, but they would not be allowed to convert an existing apartment complex over to short-term rental. And then, of course, the last change that stands out is that previously we had in there that short-term rental shall provide proof that sales tax records to the Department of Revenue have been submitted and that a guest register has been maintained. That's being changed to the short-term rental operators shall provide proof that sales tax records have been submitted to the Department of Revenue showing the city as a short-term rental location or that such taxes have been collected by a third party. So we've tried to clarify a lot of the language based on the workshop that we had so that we are still able to obtain some level of proof that the taxes have been paid without it being solely from the Department of Revenue, that they can provide proof that the taxes are being paid through a third-party agency.
So they don't have to prove or give a list of what they paid. They just have to prove that it's being paid.
That's correct, yeah.
So he's building a hotel that's not a hotel? So he has to follow no rules the hotel has to follow.
Well, if they come to
Nobody
us,
working there, have to, nobody be there 24 hours, 7. I mean, this is the same thing this guy been doing for the last year. And the people in this area don't want this.
yeah.
So all these little things you change, they ain't helped anything. But they're gonna have 40 short-term rentals, is what he's gonna have in one building.
Okay.
And that's not what we're looking for. He wants to build a hotel, build a hotel. I mean, they can tell you the rules and regulations. Kenny can tell you what you gotta follow to do that. You have to have staff, you have to have people changing there. Somebody gotta be there 24/7. And this guy don't have to do anything, but he has a hotel. I mean, this is still, to me, it's got any better. This is, you made a little maneuver, but they hadn't really approved anything. So the same deal again. He building a hotel, that's not a hotel.
Do I have any other questions?
Yeah,
I have a question for
I want
the
to give other folks an opportunity, then come back to me. Thank
All
you,
right,
sir.
Mr. Glavin?
Go ahead, Kenny.
Director. So this ordinance, if we had, would restrict what type of short-term rental in what zone?
Well, we already had that. I think what we were doing actually was clarifying it. You know, short-term rental, again, is not allowed in any single-family zone, period.
Got that.
Okay.
But it is allowed in R20 and R30?
As a conditional use.
As
RM20 and RM30 as a conditional use.
So here's my question. If you had the property zoned as RM 20 or 30, and there was a vacant lot, there was a home, and there was an apartment. The apartment cannot get conditional use for short-term rental, correct?
Under this ordinance,
To this ordinance?
right. Mhm.
The home that is situated there, it's not an apartment, it's a home, could it convert to short-term rental?
It could be used as short-term rental. Now, this doesn't stop anyone from applying.
I understand.
Yeah, people will still apply in those districts. What this does is gives the planning commission and the council to consider each case on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
And there will probably be some that y'all feel comfortable approving. Our main intent here, though, was to make sure that the conversion was removed, because that's what we were running into the most.
And then the vacant lot, of course, they can apply for whatever.
Yes, sir.
But apartments, they can apply for short-term rental development or, whatever that is duly zoned for.
That's correct.
So this would, in essence of those three scenarios, it would restrict the existing apartment.
Well, now, let me back up just a little bit. If there's a house and an apartment on a piece of property, and the owner comes in and proposes to completely reconstruct one of those, so that it would meet hotel standards, then the planning commission and the council could consider that. So that door is being left open, but with yes, sir. In theory, we're probably not going to receive a lot of applications from a large apartment complex where they're going to come in and basically gut the entire building and go back in with conduit and those type of things that they would have to meet hotel standards.
I just want to get the
Yes.
picture, and I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
I may be misunderstanding. The apartment complex and the home that are on the same zoned area, the apartment complex cannot convert to short-term, can individual units.
In an apartment complex?
Yeah.
They can request it, but if this ordinance is passed, it would prohibit that.
Okay.
And again, we're doing this for.
Well, let's not parse the words and say they couldn't request it. If it's banned, if it's got a complete ban, I don't care if they can request it. I can request that the sky be painted red.
Yes.
It's impossible to do, so it's irrelevant to discuss. But we're creating standards for a multi-unit facility that single units don't have to abide by. For example, the home, it doesn't have to be built with hotel standards, and it doesn't require someone to be on site. And I don't know that there's an actual law that requires a hotel to have somebody on site. Of course, it's good business, and you should. But where we're creating standards differently for different groups of people in different places. And
Well, from a life safety standpoint, there are differences to consider, and I'm talking about from a building code, fire code standpoint. If you're converting a single-family house to a short-term rental, you're very near to the door to get outside into what's called a public way. It's a different situation with an apartment complex where you may have multiple floors, and there may be an extended distance to be able to get to.
do fire standards not apply to apartment complexes when they're built?
Fire standards do apply to.
Well, I would
apartment
assume that
complexes.
fires burn the same way, whether it's a short-term rental or whether it's an apartment complex or a hotel.
That's true. I wouldn't argue with you on that point, but we've got a lot of hotel complexes in this town that were built to codes years and years ago, where those codes have been updated and fire standard requirements have increased over the years. So some of these apartment complexes, that are 40 years old, are not built to current standards, and could really require some extensive changes in order to be made safe. Some of them may not even have fire-rated walls or fire-rated
But
corners.
we're banning an entire segment of that market economy because of a few apartment complexes that may have been built prior to standard changes. I just don't see the prudence in that. I think that if that's the case, we should amend it to state that whether the fire standards would have to be updated to convert. It wouldn't necessarily be that they rebuilt a structure or substantial reconstruction to meet some hotel codes. But
I think if it's
if it's acceptable for the standard of living for one individual for a longer period of time, it should be acceptable for the standard of living for a short period of time. And I think we're using these codes to dance around the fact that we just don't want to have to deal with what we dealt with a while back with the gentleman that wanted to basically convert his structure into a short-term hotel. And I think that the council has done a great job at arbitrating whether these people should do it or shouldn't, or if it's appropriate for that area or that structure or that development. I'm going to vote no on this because I think we've done a great job of delineating what should and shouldn't be done instead of creating a complete ban to prevent those that should be allowed that right from accessing those rights. I have nothing further.
All right, do I have any other questions or comments?
Yes. Unless, I want to give everybody an opportunity. I'd like to go back to what Mr. Creel said, but also what Mr. Lawrence said, and let's take this development on Briarfield that was on the agenda, removed from the agenda, placed on the agenda again, removed from the agenda. It's in an RM 30, I believe, or RM 20 zone.
RM 30.
It's behind a couple of residential homes, so it's a parcel behind homes that front Briarfield. It's 40 units, and the developer wants them all to be short-term rentals. He could build apartments there, no problem.
That's correct.
He wants to build short-term rentals. And personally, I have a problem with that, and so do a lot of the neighbors there. And what I heard at our last council meeting was, from most of you, and I think I pointed this out, that you need to listen to folks in the neighborhood. And what they're saying is that they don't mind a residential setting for a short-term rental where it's appropriately zoned. And in the Briarfield neighborhood, I bet there are half a dozen different zoning classifications. Jerry, you may correct me there, but it's commercial, it's residential. But again, the RM and RM 30 and RM 20 is residential. And the fact that, as Mr. Lawrence said, and I think Mr. Creel would agree to, that when you build 40 short-term rentals or 48 short-term rentals in a complex, basically it's a hotel with none of the amenities, none of the, I guess, supervision. There's nobody required to live on site that manages those apartments. And the fact that there are very few folks, if any, that I've heard from in that neighborhood that want a cluster, if you will, or a complex of short-term rentals, particularly 40 of them. But I appreciate you pointing out that you could build a new complex for short-term rentals if the council approved it as a conditional use. But you couldn't convert an existing apartment complex in terms of a room here or a room there, which we have done on occasion. And it bothers me because it's going to be hard not to appear arbitrary and capricious once you've approved a unit within an apartment complex. I don't know how you justify approving some and not approving others. I think it's the camel's nose in the tent kind of thing. But that concludes my comment. Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of things. Number one, can you tell me the difference in A agriculture and AR agricultural?
I'm sorry?
A agriculture and AR agriculture.
Okay, A agricultural is the standard agricultural zoning district. We came up with the AR actually for flood purposes. It's called agricultural restricted. And what it is, it acknowledges the fact that there are some agricultural properties out there that are not necessarily buildable properties. If you'll look at our map, you'll see that some of the islands that are in the bay are zoned AR. And because we changed that zoning designation on those islands to AR, we were able to get credit points through the National Flood Insurance Program that helped our rating. So it just limits what you can do on there on a piece of AR property.
Okay, so basically AR is non-buildable, non-livable, right?
It's not entirely not buildable. It limits what you can put on it. It's very limited in what you can put there.
Okay, the reason I ask is I've gotten a lot of calls, especially in my ward, of people who may have 100 acres on the river. And they might not have, and it's zoned agricultural, and in no way does that piece of property affect anyone around them, and they have a desire to do short-term rentals on that property. And so I would like to see the agriculture move to conditional use, because there are some areas that make sense on the river for agricultural zone properties, not all of them. And so not a right by you, a right, but as conditional use, where if they do want to do that, we could review that case by case, and, if they wanted to bring that forward. So I'll make a motion to move this from not permitted to conditional use, on the.
A zoning.
On the A zoning. I would like to make a motion to,
Make a motion to amend it.
make a motion to amend, the,
Language of the.
amend the language of the item to you move agricultural to, may be authorized as conditional uses.
Is that both of them, Nathan, A and
Well, I
AR?
mean, if there's that's why I ask, if there are, AR, if it's completely not usable, then there's no reason to move it to that. But if there are maybe possibly some circumstances that you could build on an AR, I would like to move that there as well and review that case by case. And now, if it's going to affect the surrounding area, but a lot of these are very, very large tracts of land that doesn't affect anyone around them, as far as neighbors and stuff go, if they were to do short-term rentals. So, I would take that advice from you. Are there?
Yes, we have had a number of people that live on the river especially, that have very large lots and a large single-family house there where they're a distance away from their neighbors. And they've actually wondered why it's prohibited there, when if they have somebody there, the neighbors can't even see their house or notice whether there are people are coming and going. And we actually had that discussion while this was going through Planning Commission about some of those larger lots. Once you get away from the water, short-term rental is not really an issue. But on the river and in some of those areas.
All the people who have contacted me have lived on the river and have large tracts of land, and, in Ward 7, so, all right,
I'd
go
like
ahead.
a suggestion. I think you ought to table this and find that out for sure, what you want to do with the agriculture in the AR. Because like you said, you need to find that out. You need to go look at the land yourself. That's your ward. You're the only person who's got the 40 acre property, so we don't have that down here. So you need to find out for sure what you want to do with that.
Well, if we put it as conditional use, it can be, so, my question is this, AR, are there any properties that could possibly be, short-term rentals could be on those?
In theory, there shouldn't be any AR where it has a structure on it. Most of the property that we picked for AR was marshland.
Okay,
Yeah,
so we'll
that's
just
what we
leave
do.
AR in where it's at, and I'll change my motion to just move the agricultural, to conditional use. Yes. Okay, so amend it after we vote on the resolution?
Yeah, what you'd be doing is requesting that a public hearing be held, because it is going to be a text amendment.
Okay.
So we can do that. We can take the charge from the council and go back and conduct a public hearing before the planning commission.
Okay. All right, so then we don't vote on it now. All right. All right, any other discussion?
Withdraw your
I do a little bit.
motion.
You want to go first?
Just saying withdraw.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Withdraw your second.
All right, who wants to go first?
I just want to have a little bit more discussion on this. So I'm listening to the council member from Ward 5 talk about the residents in a particular neighborhood doesn't like that the apartments can go to short-term rental. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Is that what I heard you state? I just want to make sure I heard that.
For a new construction, newly constructed complex. I think we've all been through the past couple of years with condos, individuals' condos flipping to short-term rental, and also apartments within complexes being flipped to short-term rentals. We've done that. This issue concerns new construction, a new complex for the purpose of short-term rentals, 40, 48 units, whatever.
I understand that what we're talking today is about an ordinance that prohibits an existing apartment from
Convert.
applying, or they can apply, but this would prohibit them from moving ahead. And you mentioned there was residents in a particular neighborhood that didn't want that, right? They didn't want that to happen in the existing, or they didn't want short-term rentals.
No, they don't mind short-term rentals.
They just don't want it in an existing. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you stated? Just want to understand.
Okay.
No, the issue right now is there's a vacant lot, and a developer wants to build 48 short-term rentals. That's what they object to. If he built 48 apartment units, not a problem. It's currently zoned for that. They don't want 48 short-term rentals in a complex in the middle of an area that's mostly residential.
Okay, so on those individual basis, we would hear the outcry from those residents when we're reviewing that as a council to determine, should we approve and move on with this, or should we deny it based on the outcry and the existing single-family homes in that area?
And this is off the agenda. It's been on the agenda, off the agenda twice. I don't know if it'll ever be placed back on the agenda. It may never come up, but if it does, I think I'm sure you'll hear from those residents.
Okay, but today we're not doing that. We're not hearing a conditional use. We're actually taking an ordinance that applies to the entire city, broadly to the entire city, not looking at an individual neighborhood today. So I do have some pause on my vote for this today, based on, it being broadly used and not applying the conditional use application test to an applicant that is applying for this, and we should apply it as such based on other information and factors. That's all I have. Thank you.
Nothing else? All right, anyone else?
But if this is adopted today, it would permit new construction of a short-term rental complex in an RM 2030 zone anywhere in the city if the council approved that as a conditional use.
That's correct. And remember, too, that if it comes to us and the intent is, and I'm speaking for our department and the fire department, if it comes to us as an apartment complex with the intent of being built for short-term rental, we're going to review those plans like we would for a hotel, because in essence, it is a hotel. And some of these requests that we're getting are essentially, to use your term, dancing around trying to build build a hotel under the guise of an apartment complex. And we can't do that. For life safety purposes, we would have to make sure that they meet the stringent requirements of a hotel if that's what it's going to be used for.
One question, Jerry. If this is passed, so the guy with the 40 units can come by and apply for that? Well, that's what he's gonna do. I mean, that's all the purpose we're doing.
His case has not been heard yet. His case is still out there pending. He had it removed from the council agenda for the 48 units. Now, like I told you before, he's got some other things he's got to work out as far as the land goes, as far as ingress and egress into the land. But to answer your question, if this passes, since he's building new units, he could come in and apply for conditional use to build these new units, and we're going to review the plans as a hotel. But he could continue to do that because it's new. All this is affecting is any existing apartment complexes out there that are trying to convert. If they're trying to convert over to being used for a hotel or short-term rental, then that's what this ordinance change would affect.
Well, that's what, so I don't understand why we give anybody the option of something we really don't want. That does no good for the city. None. We can't collect the short-term rental we're doing right now. Now you're gonna have a guy with 40 units? I mean, that's what's gonna happen when you pass this. So what we're doing is hurting ourselves again. Hotel, motel, they can't do that. They gotta buy by the law, they gotta turn everything in it. I mean, he deals in that business. Ain't no getting around that. This guy here, you have no shot of collecting 40 units from this guy's short-term rentals. I mean, why should we dig a hole and jump in it? And that's what we're doing with this thing.
So is your position that we should allow people to convert from existing apartments over to short-term rental?
Short-term rental is the thought of that people in their homes, renting out their homes, period. Now y'all making it into hotels, motels, and everything else, and that's not what the purpose of the original short-term rental stuff. You creating a problem yourself by saying, oh yeah, everybody can do this now. You take four duplexes, turn them short-term rental. That was never the purpose of short-term rental. People was renting their houses out on the beaches, and that's how it started. But once you open that door, and that's what happened now, you know, created a lot of problems. And every week, or every other week, we spend an hour and a half on short-term rentals. There's a lot of minutes in the city we have to deal with. And the short-term rentals don't gain anything for the city of Biloxi. So the more we do this, it makes everything worse for us, harder to collect, and just creates problems for you. You're gonna have to hire 2 or 3 people on short-term rentals. And more expenses. I mean, that's what it's gonna come to. We're gonna spend half our time running down short-term rental people. So now I'm not for anything that's gonna help anybody build 20 units, 30 units, and say, they're not a hotel, but it's all short-term rental. That is not the right thing for the city of Biloxi.
I have a quick question, and then I think Dr. Tisdale and Mr. Deming has something. So the reason that this language is like it is we're trying to prevent current apartments or new construction from converting, basically the new construction to building an apartment to cut the corners and then saying, hey, I want to change this to short-term rental. Is that what I'm understanding?
Right.
Okay, so if someone wanted to, could we not, instead of just saying, no, you can't take your apartment and do it and change it to a short-term rental, could we not say, okay, yeah, conditional use, but you have to make these modifications to your apartment to fit into the laws so that, you know, they can't cut the corners and say, hey, I didn't have to do this, this, and this, you know, so they...
And that's what we would do. Let me tell you, if somebody comes to us and makes an application, I can't refuse an application. If I can't just tell them, no, we can't accept that application. When they come in, if there's a venue for it, if there's a provision for it, I would have to accept that application. Now, when it goes to DRC, yes, we're going to tell them that if your intent is to do this and you're willing to gut that building and to bring it up to meet all of the standards that we would require for a hotel, then we can take it to the planning commission, we can take it to the city council, and then they can make the decision on it.
But if we pass this, does it prevent that?
No.
It would, but the city council always has the authority to, you know.
But would it even come, we wouldn't even know about it. If we pass this ordinance and someone came to y'all and y'all like, no, it would never get to the point to where we even knew about it.
A person can always file an appeal. If I turn something down in the office, then they can always file an appeal to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustments and Appeals and then come to the city council. So they still have another venue for getting it before y'all if they disagree with whatever we decide.
All right, that's all I have. Dr. Tisdale?
Okay.
2 things on this issue of flipping apartment units for short-term rentals. One of the first, if not the first we heard of this was the apartment complex. It's Cypress Cove. Was that the old, what's the name of the? No, Cypress Cove, but before that it was Saxony Apartments.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I mean, this is exactly what we had. We had short-term rentals that were operating off the grid. You had the owner of those apartments renting to some people, flipping them to short-term rentals for other folks. You remember we had the residents here and all that stuff. I mean, that's what we're trying to get away from. Leaving that behind. Next thing, did I hear when we were talking about agriculture and agricultural restricted zones, did I hear that there was going to be a public hearing?
The recommendation for a text change to allow short-term rental on agriculturally zoned properties as a conditional use.
Okay, so you're looking to have you'll schedule a public hearing on that?
We'll get that set up.
I like the fact in here, and I appreciate the matter that it prohibits converting any established apartment complex. So I can vote to support this because if we approve it today, then that puts an end to that. it still bothers me that at this moment, you could have a developer come in and build a short-term rental complex. That still bothers me. But if it's going to be a conditional use, then it will come to the council for that matter for approval. Thank you. That concludes my comments.
All right, Mr. Deming.
Director Creel, what exactly are the standards, when you say build to the standards that we require for a hotel, what exactly differentiates between hotel standards and apartments standards?
Remember, with an apartment complex.
I won't remember anything, just, if you just tell me what they are.
Okay, we've mentioned it before, but that's okay. With an apartment complex, there's an assumption that because people are living there for a long period of time, they're more familiar with the exits, they're more familiar with the ways to get out of the building. There are certain ratings for the walls on the inside. Now, both are required to be sprinklered, both an apartment complex and a hotel. Yes, and also the exit lighting is required for hotels to help people get out of there quicker. The assumption with a hotel is that you've got people that come down here that are staying there for a night or two or a week, and they're not familiar with those exit passages and those kind of things. So what these provisions are put in there for, to help get them out of the building quicker. Now, the other part of it too also is that it's much more expensive with a hotel because a hotel is considered a commercial operation. So with a commercial operation, you have to enclose your wiring in conduit, whether it's metal-clad conduit or rigid conduit. Now, what I've heard on the cost of that with Mr. Zhang was that was going to cost him an additional $100,000. But that's what we would require because the code requires, because it is a commercial operation. If you take an apartment complex or you build an apartment complex and you want it to be used for short-term rental, you're basically building a hotel. So the same code would apply. You would have to do the wiring in conduit and you'd have to put in things like exit lights. So,
Are there any existing hotels that don't live up to that standard? And what year, what code book was that passed and required upon developers?
well, the codes change every 3 years.
Right, so
The
I'm
building
asking-
code and the fire code.
That specific code with the conduit, when was that passed? When has it been incorporated into the construction?
I'd have to go
requirements?
back and see. It's been in there for a long time, but I could pull that information up and email it to you.
Do we have any existing hotels that predate that code?
There may be some, yes, sir, there may be some that we're
But
not wired in
we're not
conduit.
requiring them to update their systems to operate though,
Well,
right?
the issue is, and you run into this a lot, the code takes into consideration that there are existing buildings in place that were built to an inferior code. And the way that they look at it is, if that building was built in compliance with a code that was in effect at that time, then it's okay, unless they change the use of that building to another occupancy classification. And when you're changing an apartment complex to be used as a hotel, that's considered a change in occupancy classification. And theoretically, when you do that, you're supposed to bring everything up to the current code. That's correct, yes.
What'd you say? Go ahead.
If you have something to add to that one line of thought, feel free. I'm gonna change through a couple different things.
Can a hotel turn into an apartment complex?
If the zoning's correct, and it usually is, I mean, they could, but you're thinking of it in reverse. The hotel is probably built to a much higher building and fire standard than the apartments. Can it change over? Yeah, because that would kind of be a step down. Now, we would still review it to make sure that if it's an older hotel, that it's going to meet the requirements, because that, again, even though they're dropping from a higher classification to a lower, that's still a change in occupancy classification.
But if you build a complex, you don't build to the standard of a hotel. but then you can also take that complex and turn it basically into a hotel. So as I said, you're fighting yourself here.
If you're listening to what I'm saying, it's
should be
very
built
clear. It's not confusing, it's very clear.
I didn't say it was confusing.
Let's use Mr. Zhang's property, for example. He built a 30-unit apartment complex, and he built it to apartment standards and to meet apartment building and fire codes. When he was 99% complete with the building, someone approached him, a real estate agent approached him and said, you need to consider converting that over to a short-term rental. So he called and asked, would I be able to do that? And I said, well, the code allows short-term rental in RM30 as a conditional use. So he pursued it, and he came through, and he got approval from the Planning Commission, he got approval from the City Council. Well, that was the first time that had happened with us, but we learned a lot in that, because it would open the door for other people to come in and say, I'm gonna build this apartment complex, and then come in here at the last minute and say, well, I've changed my mind. I think I'm gonna go to short-term rental on this, and I wanna apply for it. So, they didn't put in the fire-rated walls that were required, they didn't put in the conduit that was required. It just opened a real bad door.
So Director, why wouldn't we just change the building code for short-term rentals?
We don't change the building code. The city council does not have the authority to change the building code. It is a minimum standard. It's a universal code that is put together by code professionals with the purpose of life safety only, not for political reasons or flexibility. Now, the zoning ordinance is our code, the land development ordinance. So the Planning Commission and the City Council has the right to recommend and make changes to those codes because we own it. But even though we adopt, it's just like us trying to make changes to FEMA's codes. It's not our code to make changes to. We either adopt it in entirety or we don't adopt it, so.
So what we're doing, the code itself doesn't have provisions for short-term rentals. So we're making assumptions that short-term rentals then are hotels, or hoteliers. Wait,
let me correct that. The building code and the fire code look at it in terms of occupancy classification. And what the fire chief and I have to do is to look at whatever the application is and to classify it as one of those occupancy classifications.
Well, then, let me clarify what I was saying then. You're making the assumption that a short-term rental is more closely classified to a hotel, and you're attempting to adopt those standards. However, we have existing hotels that don't have the conduit requirements that are in operation right now. So it feels like this is a backdoor way to get rid of the project that we don't want to deal with. Further, I got a text message from,
remember that those hotels.
Finish here, Director
Okay.
Creel. I apologize, but you've spoke a lot, and I just want to get this out. I believe a person living in a hotel for one night and a person living in an apartment complex for one night, if we're talking about conduit and lines, maybe I'm ignorant of the fact, but I feel like the electricity runs the same way either. You have a family that turns the lights on, eats dinner, turns the lights off, goes to sleep. I feel like it's used the same way. Now, if we're talking about signs to come in and out, exit and egress signs to inform people, that's a simple fix that anybody could do, and I agree. We should increase the standards to make sure that people know how to get in and out in times of emergency. Do I agree that I think that there's a higher likelihood of times of emergency because of conduit piping due to one classification of a person being in a room versus another classification of person being in a room? I don't agree with that. Again, I think it feels like we're just trying to make a provision to prevent from dealing with what we've had to deal with in the past, which we are dealing with appropriately. We are taking into consideration the neighborhood. We're taking into consideration the appropriate nature of the short-term rental and its location and its use. So I think we do a great job on this council, and I applaud all of us for working diligently and being very invested in our communities with regard to short-term rentals. But I don't think we should, again, ban an entire segment of our community that has the opportunity to make a substantial difference in their own property with regard to their financial potential.
Two more things, and then I'll stop. Number one of the reasons that this was brought up was because there was an argument from some council members that they didn't feel comfortable taking residential living units out of our inventory, apartments, and converting those over to short-term rental. They felt that we were losing the places where the people actually live for long periods of time. That was one of the arguments, and that's kind of what triggered this argument. But in going back to the hotels, and I don't know but what these hotels don't all have conduit in them. But remember that when they were built for the purpose of short-term rental, and they were built in compliance with the code that was in effect at that time. So those are grandfathered in. Now, if someone comes in now with a new application, they're going to be held to the higher standard. So with that, I'll stop talking.
Thank you. And I do remember when there were members on the council that were worried about the inventory of homes, and I don't think that was the majority of us. There was a minority of people that made that comment. And look, we appreciate all the work you've done, Mr. Wheeler and the rest of the members on the Planning Commission and the DRC. I just think you and I may have a difference of opinion on how we should move forward, and hopefully the council will agree with me. That's all I have.
All right, Dr. Tisdale and then Ms. Newman.
Sure. One other thing that I believe Councilman Glavin mentioned, and that triggered a thought, where we did have this apartment complex that was built, and at the 11th hour, or after, almost when construction was complete, the request was made for a conditional use. And to me, at that time, that was a back door to getting a cluster of short-term rentals. But also, I think, there was never a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission because of how that was done. And I don't think it was by design. It's just that when it came to the council as a conditional use, now there was when it was constructed as an apartment complex, that went to the Planning Commission. Did it?
No, he didn't have to.
He didn't have to because it was appropriately zoned.
Already zoned correctly, and what he was asking for was apartments. So the zoning was correct, the use was correct, so there was no requirement for a public hearing. We reviewed the building plans, we issued him a permit, and he went out and built it as an apartment complex, and then came in at the 12th hour and wanted to convert it over. And then we brought it to the Planning Commission and the City Council, and the recommendation was, if it's going to be a hotel, go back and ask for commercial zoning. So he went back and he came back and asked for CB zoning, and that's what's being held right now.
That's on the
request.
proposed complex.
That's
right?
correct, yes, sir.
All right, going back to the original, the apartments that he constructed that are already there in existence, that ended up being, there were short-term rental units approved there, right, or the whole?
No, that, when he converted or wanted to convert over to short-term rental, he did come to the Planning Commission and to the City Council.
He did have a hearing then?
He got approved,
Okay,
yes, sir,
that's
for all 30 units.
I couldn't recall. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm done, honest, I'm done.
All right, Ms. Newman?
I just think it's crazy that I can think of several hotels off of Highway 90 that I'm not going to name that certainly don't look like they meet any codes, specifically any extensive codes. But it's just crazy that just because they were pre-approved codes and not updated, that they get a pass. And let's be real, these hotels that I'm talking about do probably, I don't know, they're really cheap, maybe $20 a night, I don't know. So it's like telling these certain people that can't afford a nice hotel room, good luck, we don't care about you. So it's just crazy to me.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call for the question. All in favor of this item? All opposed? 5 to 2. Glavin, Dixie, George, Robert, Nathan opposed. Felix, and Dr. Tisdale 4.
Let me just mention one thing before you close out on this issue. If you reject the ordinance in its entirety, then you're also rejecting the requirement to provide proof of tax information and those other things. If you would consider, if that's the issue, is the conversion, if you would consider removing the conversion and then moving forward with the rest, that would that would help us, so.
So that would be just, what item on the,
I think they missed the workshop.
so all the text changes are together, so we can't,
You could put that back on by itself next week, couldn't you?
That's what I was saying. Could you, Director Creel, could you work with the administration and bring us just a clean version of that portion?
We can do that, yes.
for next meeting? Okay. And then, now I would like to propose a text change, making A agricultural conditional use instead of prohibited. And, well, we have to do that to,
You can bring that.
yeah, the planning commission to do that, and then we'll plan a public hearing on that? Okay, all right. Now we'll move on to okay, we need a second and a vote on that. Second by Ms. Newman. All in favor? All opposed? 7-0. Okay, now we'll move on to item B on the agenda.
Ordinance to amend and add Chapter 18 entitled Cemeteries.
All right, this was originally moved by Mr. Lawrence and Tisdale.
I did. I've been working on this with Jeff O'Keefe, and we talked to Peter, and Peter he made some changes, but I still have a problem. Until I settle this, I'd like to table this. And the problem I have is A and B. There's a couple of things here I think where you should be able to permit to have more bodies placed there instead of just one. But I need to look at sitting with Jeff O'Keefe, finding out the size, but you can put it into a burial site. Did you see? Did y'all have the thing in front of you?
I'm pulling it up now.
It says here you got to one body or one cremation. I think those are the numbers I have a problem with, that I'm trying to get changed. So that's just something I needed. And what I wanted to do is get something to y'all, the rest of the council, to look at it, because it's not my cemetery. Y'all have loved ones you bury in there, and you want to bury 6, 7 people in there, you have the right to do it. I think the limitation we put on this is something brand new. There's really no limit to what you can bury into a site. You know, people bury on top of them, 10 years later, bury them again, and all they do is remove the bones and place them in a spot. So the limitations to me is something I think we out of line are doing. And that's why I'm trying to come up with numbers that would set to the size of the plot. Was it 10 by 10? Because we only changed in this new area, right? The 54? Because it would be affecting everybody that owns plots in the
Let me
cemetery.
just clarify. I've heard your concerns from last time, and I did have Jeff O'Keefe come in this morning to get his opinion on some of these, so that substitute 3 that we put on for today, that was with me working with Jeff over what he thought was reasonable, and there's some aesthetics involved of how many monuments you have per space, how many, and we added some additional space in there to allow for some of that. And so that version, substitute 3, has been tweaked since this morning with some input from
It
Jeff O'Keefe.
didn't change the numbers
It
of the cremations in it, or how many coffins you can put into a 10 by 10. What you're doing, you're limiting them on 4 by 8s and the 10 by 10s, and you didn't change any of that. And I appreciate you talking to Jeff, because I deal with him. I mean, that's what he does for a living. So I'm trying to get all the right things in the right road, so I can bring it to y'all and let you look at what you can do, what is the right number, and how you memorialize 15 people in a gravesite. Well, you put out a plaque, or you don't have to put out little monuments. You can do what you want. And when you do that, then that creates the problem. Also, I don't understand, one extra one more thing, why you can't go above ground in the new site. What's the reason for that?
It's for maintenance.
Say again?
For maintenance, perpetual care and maintenance. There's no above ground, no mausoleums above ground there, because that way they can get in and out and maintain it. They're going to be maintaining these perpetually.
I mean, the cemeteries, a lot of them, most of them have like 3 layers on top of the grave site.
Well,
So I spent a lot of time in the grave checking all this out. It's pretty nice looking things in there.
Right.
You know, but we don't know, the person that dies don't know that, but anyway. So I'm trying to make sure we do this the right way one time, not amend it, and every time we turn around, do this. So we don't want a conditional use of the grave. Okay? So anyway, I was just asking y'all to table this, and I want to get these numbers, and then I want to get y'all a copy so y'all can look at what we're doing from the beginning.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have,
We have a motion and a second. Can I have some discussion?
yeah, before we vote on that, Robert would like to.
But we're tabling it for how long?
Subject to call.
Okay.
As soon as I can get it done. I mean, I'm just,
Hold on, I'm not sure that I'm not a crypt keeper, and I don't want to talk this to death. So, help me understand, is your problem with B, with the cremains? And again, I'm not a crypt keeper, so cremains, from my layman's perspective, is cremated remains, is that correct?
right,
So you're opposed to, what about it?
the number.
So tell me what the opposition is.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a 12 by 12? I mean, you might be
So
able
you
to,
want them to be able to put more cremains in one, okay, that's what I didn't understand, thank you.
not the cremation, it's just that you could use more space in there, maybe 5 or 6 of them. That never any trouble.
What's in there right now for a 10 by 10 plot, it says up to 6 cremains, and we base that on what is there existing and what's sort of the standard practice. I guess technically, if you were like, how many can I get into a 10 by 10? I mean, maybe you could get 20 in there, I don't know, but then how do you memorialize that with the monuments? Do you have 20 little monuments, or do you have a big monument with 20 names on it? You know, that's kind of not the purpose of this. We're trying to be consistent with the graves and the aesthetics of those. So allowing up to 6 cremains or up to two coffins and 2 cremains. That's generally the way it is now. You may have a coffin, and later on they may put a cremains at the foot of the coffin later on, but so.
Well, the reason I brought that up because some of the tombs that are there, the big ones, they're supposed to be like maybe 3 coffins. They might have 20 names on the front door. So they just keep putting them in there. I mean, there's no number or limit that you could do now in the old cemetery.
There's no limit for mausoleums in this either, right now. What we have in there, these limits don't apply to mausoleums. So that,
No, I'm not talking about the rest of the cemetery. You keep talking about the mausoleum. I'm dealing with the cemeteries itself and the tombs that you build on top of the ground, not mausoleums, not the ones you got all the people in there. That's different. Now, you calling the tombs above the ground a mausoleum?
yes.
It sounds like calling for the question to table it sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a real
Thank
good
you.
idea to me.
Okay. Any other discussion before we call for the question?
And that's both of the ones on there.
Well, C was removed.
Table both of them.
C's removed. It's not even on the agenda.
Oh, they removed C?
Yeah. I do have one quick question. The concern is not necessarily what's in the ground, but what's above it, correct?
For what? Now what?
On where it says one body or 1 cremains or 2
Right,
body.
right. Those
It's not what's in the ground, it's more so what's above it.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? 7-0. All right, item C has been tabled or taken off the agenda. We'll move to item D.
Resolution abandoning all 5-foot swell easements for a replat of Lot 3 for LZ Place subdivision.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
All right, moved by Kenny Glavin, second by Dr. Tisdale. Do you have any discussion?
We already heard from Mr. Wheeler. This is a pretty good development. We're trying to build out the rest of the vacant land. This will expedite that, and I think it's good, real good for the area.
I agree with Mr. Glavin, did a good job explaining that.
Any other discussion? Call for the question. All in favor? 7-0.
See how easy that was? See how easy that was?
All right. Now we'll move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I make that motion.
Second.
Tisdale, second by Mr. Glavin. All right, any discussion?
Nothing.
Awesome. Mr. Glavin?
I have none.
All right, anyone else?
I've got just,
All right,
on N, Mr. Leonard.
November?
Was it, yes, sir, November. It's the Downtown Housing Incentive Pilot Program budget for the fiscal year. If you'll just give me, it looks like we're debiting $50,000 from the balance. Just give me an update on it.
I think Diana can explain that better, but essentially that is, we're just saying for 2021, we're only carrying forward what we actually used, the actual balance of what we actually used, not what was awarded.
That's correct. In September, we paid out $50,000. That was not reflected in the budgets.
You gotta come talk to the mic.
Thank you, Diane. Now, would you do me a favor? Say all that again in the mic?
Yes. In September of fiscal year 2020, we paid out $50,000 as part of the downtown economic development, and it was not reflected when we did the budget because it occurred after, so we had to correct 2021 to reflect the correct amount.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Lawrence?
Second question on you, how much money you have in the new budget for this?
We only carried over what was, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but we only carried over what we hadn't spent from original $500,000.
It started at 500,000 and it's now at 385.
But don't you have some more to pay out?
So,
Yeah,
I'm saying we're just carrying over in the new year what we haven't spent of the 500,000.
Well, that's for.
There's no numbers in this resolution.
Mm-hmm. Let me report that back to you in 2 weeks.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, being,
So did you want us to remove this, or you just gonna bring us back the right thing?
there's no reason to remove it. He can just answer. Yeah.
You want to leave that in, because it reflects the $50,000 we paid already.
Yeah, but I know they have a bunch more to pay out, so we're not carrying 385. I mean, there's a lot, that's what I said, there's a lot in line to be paid out, that we already passed a bunch of.
I mean, this isn't going to affect anything we're doing in the next couple of months, so let's table it if you'd like to.
So table in.
Table in.
that's
All right, so I have a motion to table in. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
What we're carrying forward is the budget.
Opposed.
Okay, 6-1. Dr. Tisdale's opposed. And so this is subject to call?
We know the answer.
All right. Being there's no more discussion,
I'm gonna ask,
Not the amount that's paid out.
Mike,
It's not cash.
on, L, is this, money from the county? On L,
Lima,
about the money, is that the money from the county?
that's the fourth quarter allocation of port millage
Is that,
that we received, and as we have done every other quarter, we take that money and initially, we bring it into the budget, and then we allocate it to specific projects. And that's what's being done with that.
the 375?
It's 375 three times, and then the fourth quarter, they true up so that it comes out to a full mill. In this case, it was, you can see in your minutes there, it's like 430 or 440, something like that. It's whatever's in front of you there. 400 some odd thousand was the true up amount. So that all comes out to 2.1 million, which is the one county mill.
That's good, okay, I mean, the mill in the county is 2 million, and we weren't receiving that much money, so Peter, y'all did a good job to get that paid every year. That's a lot of money coming back for the harvest. That's a good one.
We didn't go after back.
Thank you, that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
No short-term rentals involved either.
No, sir.
all right, any other discussion? All right, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the consent agenda? Unanimous, 7-0. Are there any exceptions?
Understand a very simple fact.
No exceptions.
It's a budget.
All right, now we'll move to code enforcement hearings. Mr. Krill?
We paid, it was right on the borderline.
It was in September.
Yeah, if I would have had a reasonable story.
Was it paid or was it just allocated?
We sent the check over right about the deadline.
Yeah.
So
Item A on the agenda, Robert W. and Candace S. Gambrell, 2462 Pass Road. This property is still in violation.
All right, being there's no one here, case closed.
Item B, Barbara E. and Jesse L. Salters Estate, care of Rita Paulette Bigo, 0 Keesler Circle. This property is still in violation.
All right, is there anyone here on behalf or against Jesse L. Salters Estate on Keesler Circle?
Okay.
All right, this case is closed.
Item C, Barbara E. and Jesse L. Salters Estate, Rita Paulette Bigo, 0 Keesler Circle, still in violation.
All right, anyone here on behalf of Barbara and Jesse Salters Estate on 0 Keesler Circle? All right, no one here, case closed.
Item D, Barbara E. and Jesse L. Salters Estate, Rita Paulette Bigo, 0 Keesler Circle. This property is still in violation.
All right, anyone present on behalf or against Barbara and Jesse Salters Estate on 0 Keesler Circle? Being there's no one, this case is closed.
Barry, just out of here, are all these Keesler Circle properties, are they completely undeveloped?
Yes, and they're unbuildable lots too. If you've ever been down Irish Hill, and you're right there north of Keesler Circle, this is that property that's right there beside the road. The lots are not big enough to build a house on even if you wanted to.
Oh, wow. I know we've had someone come in here and file an application to return their property to Wilderness or something like that. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes, we've done that a number of times with the state of Mississippi. We've been out having to clean up state properties, and we've asked them to transfer it over to us so that, we could at least start charging taxes to it. Typically, what they will do is if it's a property that's kind of a nothing property out on an alley or something like that, they will transfer it to us. But if it's a property in a valuable location, they won't. We could request this property from the estate, since it's not buildable anyway, and, the city could take over the maintenance on it.
We're going to start that. You're going to see a lot of these resolutions coming forward as far as taking on a resolution from the council requesting the transfer of the property from the state to us. They're pretty good at ignoring things, but I think we've got the mechanism now to do that.
All right. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, we've had private owners come to us and file a resolution to return their property to a natural state. I remember one coming and we kept charging them, and they said they're not going to build on it. It's surrounded by woods, and they just wanted to return it back to woods so they would no longer be assessed to this stuff. And we approved that, and I don't remember what the process was. And is that process applicable to where these properties are at, or are these properties too close to all of the developed plots around it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
The first part was, I do recall us having a property owner, a private property owner, not state, come before us and request that we allow them to return their property, return it to a natural state.
We've had people actually do that. Now,
is that not appropriate for that location?
It could be. This would make a nice little city park or something like that at the end of that street, especially since you can see it from Irish Hill. But now, traditionally, what has happened when we've been approached by somebody that wants to make the argument that, this is a natural habitat or something like that, in most cases, it's simply an attempt to keep from cleaning the property up. There are some legitimate requests that we've got for that, but most of them are just a way to get out of cleaning the property up, so.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Anything else?
We'll now move to the routine agenda. Do I have an emotion?
So moved.
Second? Second, but George. Dr. Tisdale first, George. All right. Any discussion?
Yeah, Walt, what's the scoop this week? No change.
What about dollars?
Same? Did we get the 326,000?
What we still received. Basically, no change from last week.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Call for the question. All in favor? Unanimous, 7-0. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Paul and Felix Guns. All in favor? Unanimous, 7-0. Everyone have a great Thanksgiving.